Hi, hello, and welcome to episode number 26 of CPGB, the home of underground podcasting, where we discuss comedy punk games and books. I'm your co-host, Ryan Parker, and joining me this month in studio, a very special guest, the lead singer of death metal band Eldritch Horror and the general manager of Game Theory, tabletop game store, David Price.
Greetings, friends.
We are coming to you today from the depths of depravity, located somewhere in the steam tunnels deep beneath the soft white underbelly of Raleigh, North Carolina. David Price, welcome to the show. I've been trying to get you on this show for 2 years, and we finally made it happen, man.
I like it. I like that description. You've been trying, like you've been like driving around in a dog catcher's truck, like there he is, and throwing a net or something, and it's like, damn it.
No, I've been posting your picture up on telephone poles all over town. Have you seen this guy? He's supposed to come.
This man.
So I saw you at a recent metal show. Well, okay, first of all, why is Reed not here? So Reed Pegram, our co-host,
very
Distinction,
funny man.
Funny guy. I love him to death. But he is on vacation, honeymooning with his first wife, I like to call her. Sorry, Jenna. And we wished him the best. I think they're having a great time. I enjoy following them on Instagram. But I'm glad you were able to join us. Please refrain from revealing the location of the studio here in the steam tunnels, if you wouldn't mind. I mean, it's a nice accommodations, right?
Oh, it's all right. You know, the rats are plump and friendly, and
bioluminescent algae is lighting our way. It's lovely down here, and we have a good time. We set up some couches and an old mattress.
Just avoid the shriekers on the way in.
Yeah, and move a crust punk over and give him a bandana, and he'll be your friend for life. I saw you at a recent metal show at the Poorhouse. It was Inanimous. I don't know how to say those guys' names.
Your guess is as good as mine.
So they were the opening act, and Nightmare with a K, Datura, and of course Paladin was the lead, the headliner for that show at the Poorhouse. And I ran into you there. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do because Reed is going to be on his honeymoon. You're like, hey man, I'm standing right in front of you, and I mean,
how bad can it be, right?
Well, we're going to find out here shortly how bad it's going to be. But yeah, man, it was actually, you know what? I got you a little something from the show, and I'm going to give it to you. Yeah, here you go. Look at that.
Oh, wow. A Paladin sticker.
Yeah, a Paladin
bumper sticker.
Bumper
That's a proper sticker.
It is. It's a proper.
Or I could put it on my, I could put it on my PA cabinet or something. That'd be pretty lame, though. That's a very nice, thank you, man.
You're
That's
welcome.
A very nice sticker. How much did that set you back, man? How many doubloons?
It came free with my patch that I bought. I got a Paladin patch.
What are you going to do with that?
It's going to go on that denim jacket that I sport.
It's kind of a small patch. The sticker's a lot bigger.
Well, you got to start patches somewhere, right? I mean,
yeah.
And I don't think it's a denim jacket. I think I'm going to leave the sleeves in because.
Yeah, no, you're not.
I'm not the guy that wears.
I don't know if we're past our sleeveless
denim.
days, I think, man.
Yeah, I mean,
no offense.
You're right, though. I mean, stay in your lane, Ryan.
That's right.
Understand your.
I see those sleeveless warriors out there with their full, patch jackets, and I tip my hat to them.
I have 0 tattoos. If I had like cool tattoos and stuff to show off, I would be all over the Valiant Thor. Yeah. Because you have to like commit to a metal band for the big shield on the back.
Yeah.
And I'm too much of a fan of all bands.
They call them battle jackets, right? That's what they call. Is that what they call them?
Battle vests.
Battle vests. Thanks.
Yeah. And that's your shield. And then your shield is like, this is my band, So it's like you would have.
Or they just have the best fucking artwork.
Or
right?
they had the best artwork.
Yeah. I used to have, before those days when you all had your, you didn't have the full thing completely covered. I did have a couple of jean jackets with patches. I had an Iron Maiden Killers back patch on one.
Classic.
The other one had Slayer Hell Awaits.
Classic.
Patch. Those were very good. I had a number of small patches too. I also had like 50 or so these little tiny pins. They were not tiny, but they were, I don't know, maybe an inch, 2 inches, or an inch by an inch square pins.
Yeah.
And they were mostly of Iron Maiden because at the time that was my favorite band.
Oh, they're like little collectibles.
Yeah, and I had they were all like an album cover. It would be like Beast from the East, it would be like different tours.
Do you still have those?
I have them.
They've got to be worth something, man.
They might be. I had like about 50 of them. I lost a few over the years, but I think I still have, quite a few of them. And some of them were for other bands. I had a few other bands, but most of them were Maiden ones.
Are they
so
just like too valuable to have on a jacket now?
Yeah,
or?
I mean, that's how I lost a few because they probably fell off at a
Right.
show or something like that back in the day. But I love that stuff.
I do too, man. I like the look of, because people. It's like people say you wear your heart on your sleeve. It's like you're wearing your band on your jacket, and you walk up and you talk to somebody, and you can kind of get a feel for who they are. First of all, their ink on the sleeve if they got tattoos, and then what their patches look like. And sometimes I'm like going, 5-finger death punch, really? Oh God!
Yeah, whether if you want to stay away.
Power Man 5000.
It's like Tinder, kind of like you walk up, and
just swipe
over. You're like, hey, this guy's got got an awesome like atrophy sticker or patch on there. I'm like, I'm going to talk to this person.
But that was a great man. Did you enjoy the show? I know you said that power metal's kind of not your thing, and I guess Paladin is power metal, but Datura really is more like
Datura is more of a death metal.
Consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great time at the show. I love going to shows. It's fun. I like seeing musicians. Power metal is not my favorite style. That doesn't mean I dislike it or anything actively. I don't seek out new power metal bands to listen to routinely. A friend, recommended Paladin, said they were playing. It was amazing. And of course, I'm friends with Datura, as are all the members of my band. We're all friends with those guys and gals. And
Nightmare as
so
well.
we knew that a little bit, and we knew that they were opening, and so it sounded like a good thing. Paladin had been heavily recommended by Tyler, who is the new second guitarist in Eldritch Horror in my band, and he was very keen on how good they were and played us some of them at practice, and I was like, I want to see if these guys can pull this off live, because
you thought, okay, if you have a million opportunities in the studio to knock these riffs out, you're probably going to hit your best one.
It's something that's a common theme that I see a lot as an old bastard like myself. I see a lot of, I can't speak for other genres, but within death metal and somewhat black metal music, I'll hear records that are, this is the best thing ever, and it sounds amazing, and then you'll see the band live, and they're using it's clear they use a lot of studio tricks to make themselves sound amazing, because they're not amazing live.
Like double tracking, where it sounds like...
Yeah, they're doing a lot of stuff. They're doing tricks with the drums. They're not really... Let's put it this way. They're never going to be able to bust out some acoustic instruments and set up on the street Violent Femme style and crank out some of their tunes.
And busk.
It just wouldn't happen. So, anyways, I wanted to see what Paladin how they could play live, and they were fantastic.
I have to say that the lead guitarist is the lead singer, right? I mean, would you dare? Would we call him?
They had two lead singers, but
right, the guy
was the main guy.
The guy who was like Lemmy's doppelganger, like he was reincarnated. Did he not look like Lemmy reincarnated with like Ginger Lemmy or something?
The bassist on the right hand side. Yeah. That guy was doing the death metal vocals, and it felt a little weird. Like, it's cool that it's interesting to see a band like that,
because it would switch between power metal and then.
Yeah, because they're so clearly a power metal band, and at some point maybe they all listen to or are into death metal. But it felt a little unusual to have that tapped onto there, because the lead singer and guitarist, his clean high pitched vocals were excellent. They were excellent.
Rob Halford. I mean, it's Halford-esque.
And he was really good at that. And that is not easy.
It is not.
That's
his range was amazing. And he's pulling double duty, playing lead guitar as well.
Fantastic guitar.
So he doesn't get to just go run around the stage and have a good time during the riffs. He's pulling off the riffs. And even I don't even want to call the other guy the rhythm guitarist, because he was killing it too.
He was ripping it up. And it'd be ridiculous not to mention the drum. The drummer was incredibly good. He was
on point as well.
All in all, a great band. If you like power metal, highly recommend seeing them live. I believe they're from Atlanta.
They are from Atlanta. And it was $12 to go see 4 metal bands.
They were great. And
Anonymous even opened up the Power Trio, death metal-ish, right? I mean, is that the genre that you would place them in?
I was kind of, no disrespect to those guys, but honestly, I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention until Datura. I was there for the whole show, but I was busy socializing.
Well, actually, you weren't. You weren't really socializing as much as you were sort of
drinking.
Yeah,
that's more accurate.
Well, I mean, the Poorhouse, first of all, has changed a lot. They used to pull in jam bands all the time, and now they're programming more metal and punk, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Not that they didn't before. It's just that it seems like the lineups that are coming up are looking a lot more heavier. The old part, or the second story of the poorhouse, which is like a loft that overlooks the main stage area, just used to have pool tables and a bar that they would open sometimes, and a Galaga video game machine up there at one point. And now
it always seemed very underused.
It did, yeah, it did. Like, I mean, and people, you don't want. I mean, people shooting pool are not engaged in the show, right? So it's like, and they tend to like sort
now
of.
I feel bad.
Why?
For not watching the first two bands. It's almost as if I was playing pool.
Well, we'll get to the reason that you were, but what they've done to the second floor now is they've turned it into a record shop. So they have these massive cabinets with new vinyl, used vinyl, rock, metal, pop, everything you can possibly think of up there. And then at around 11 o'clock, they have like a coffin lid. They close everything and lock it down. So because I guess they figure people are starting to get a little drunk and they don't want people to spill drinks. But there's a bar up there now that stays open the entire night. And usually when the show's shut down around 12 or 12:30, they kick everybody out. Now you can go upstairs and drink till 2 o'clock. Which is a great idea for them. And they've like revamped the green room, and they've added another 2 more bathrooms upstairs. And it looked great. And what I really appreciated is, even though I wasn't engaged with Anonymous, I was shopping. I was like scrolling through vinyl, and I was like, this is live music. And I'm like looking at some of the coolest vinyl that I'm going to come back and buy later. Because I didn't want to like leave it there and be like, damn, I guess I won't see that. There's $20 gone, you know? And, but I was like, nah, this is how record shopping should be. You should be able to listen to live music while you're shopping for vinyl. I thought that was a great idea.
It was great. Was that record you were looking at, the Peter Schilling? Was that it?
Yeah, it was. It was the Joe Chimay Band. If you're a fan of yacht rock, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
No, you're right. It's fantastic up there. And another little note about the poorhouse, and this is not new to them, but I think his name is Jack, I believe. Is the
Jack Kane.
Yeah, the sound man at the poorhouse is a bit of a Raleigh legend.
He is.
He has been running sound at various venues, but for someone like my age range, most notably at the brewery, which is no longer in existence. It used to be on Hillsborough Street.
Right.
Just a little nondescript looking place that was there for quite a while, and was the in my opinion the venue for, at least for heavy music in the Raleigh scene.
Yeah.
I saw
wasn't the Caboose.
And this is pre-Caboose, man.
Brewery, yeah.
I mean, it
I saw my first live show there.
Like you did?
I saw my first, well, not my first live show. My first live show was when I was like 3 years old. But my first show where I went to go see music by myself, Marty Jackson drove us in his Volkswagen Bug to Raleigh. I was supposed to be staying over at somebody's house. Mom, if you're listening, I'm sorry. And we went up to see Corrosion at the brewery in, I believe, and I'm going to date myself here, it was 86.
Wow, that's a badass concert to have gone to, man.
Yeah. And then I think like later, then I bought Technocracy, the EP.
Yeah.
After that, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to listen to for the rest of my life.
Yeah, man, that's great. I mean, that's so. Yeah,
and
the brewery
we went by the Fallout shelter,
spot.
but we couldn't get in.
The Fallout shelter was an awesome place too, but the brewery was kind of like the place that you wanted to play as a local band. That's where you wanted to play. It's where I saw so many great bands.
This is before Poorhouse, before Lincoln Theater, before
way before
any of those smaller venues, Maywood, and all that.
So Jack, I'm not sure if how long he ran sound, but back when I was, a young man in the first iteration of my band in the early 90s, he ran sound at the brewery, and he is really good at it.
He's excellent.
He's a fantastic sound man, and that is not easy to find.
And he's a one-man show. He was troubleshooting cable problems in the middle of the show.
Yep.
He didn't just like let the song in and be like, hey, check your cable over the microphone. He was up on stage doing that.
He knows his business, and he's good at it.
Absolutely knows his business, and he whips people into shape.
Yep.
We were also talking about Datura earlier, and they have a female lead.
They do.
And
Kelly.
We were talking, Kelly, you know all the members of Datura, don't you?
Yes.
You're pretty good friends. Because the metal scene, the metal scene's different than the punk scene, I guess, in Raleigh, but there's a lot of overlap there. But
depends on who you ask, yeah.
It's a pretty tight scene, though, right, when you say?
The metal scene is pretty tight, man, I would say.
Yep.
I can't speak for other bands. I can tell you that the members of my band, Eldritch Horror, we practice directly above, in the room above where Datura practices. We think very highly. We're very good friends with them. Kelly's a fantastic singer.
She absolutely destroys, man. Like her range is incredible.
Yeah, it's cool because this has definitely been changing. You know, there are a lot. There always have been great female, you know, musicians in metal and punk music.
Yeah.
Obviously, been definitely more. I think of more storied history in punk rock than in metal, at least. But there are some fantastic female musicians. But I would say that in the local scene, it's not always been something that you see as much.
It's harder to get your footing.
And it's so awesome not only to have a woman fronting a death metal band, but she is a fantastic singer by any measuring stick.
And she
doesn't
holds
have
it
anything
down,
to do with her gender. She's badass at it. And so I just think it's awesome to have such a great example of like, this is anybody, you can go up there and do it. You shouldn't be held back by, there shouldn't be like a barrier to some sort of music scene because of who you are or what your gender is.
And I think the people that can actually pull off singing death metal properly, the way it's supposed to be done, is a very small percentage of people.
It's hard. It's really
you know
hard.
what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's very, like, that is a sound that a lot of people make when they're in pain, and they only do it once, right?
Yeah.
And then to be able to just do that night after night and then have a voice the next day. I mean,
it's extremely hard to learn how to do it properly, and she works. I can tell you that she works extremely hard at it, and she's good because she works hard at it.
So we were talking earlier that you were actually at the Poorhouse meeting your new guitar player and
bass player,
a new bass player. Yeah.
Well, our new guitarist was there too. So yeah, we just added a new guitarist, Tyler Pittman, who is. Both of these gentlemen are in other bands.
Okay.
This is the nature of the scene right now. And then, funny, we're talking about Kelly. So Adam, her husband, who is the bassist for Datura, is also now playing bass for Eldritch Horror for my band.
Awesome.
So we're working on new material, and both of those guys are part of the band. Adam's in, actually, I think we're his fourth band right now. He's such a good musician and such a good bass player.
And you're no longer the tallest guy in the band anymore. He's actually as tall as you.
Is he taller than me?
He is as tall as you are.
Is it just because he's younger and better looking?
And thinner.
And thinner than I am, that he looks taller? Or are you sure he's taller?
It might be the full beard, too.
Yeah,
he's
that's
slender.
the one problem with Adam in the band, and this no offense to Tyler, who looks cool, but like Adam looks cooler than the rest of us. So it's going to be like, look, that cool guy's hanging out with your dad, you know, like, who's that parole officer up there?
Actually, you were talking about going to another show recently, weren't you? Before we get into your band, you went to an Archers of Loaf show, didn't you?
Yeah, Archers of Loaf played actually last Friday, the night before the Paladin show.
And that was at the Cat's Cradle in Chapel Hill?
Cat's Cradle in Chapel Hill. I have not been to the Cat's Cradle in, I think it's been 8 to 10 years since I've been there.
It's changed a bit.
Yeah, they cleared it out more. They made the room bigger. Last time I was there, they had that weird little hallway, which you couldn't really figure out what the purpose of it was.
Oh,
and they had like a couple of video games down there and stuff like that.
I think it was so that you could go to the back bar area quickly without having to like meander through the crowd.
It was like for people to make out and bump lines or something. I don't know. I figured that's what it was for. But these are different times.
Right.
Yeah, so Archers of Loaf, don't want to damage my metal credibility here, but like,
no, I mean, but
they're a local indie rock band
of like 30 years, 25 years, maybe.
Yeah, their real peak was, I would say, around the mid 90s, 95, 96, around there. And my brother introduced me to them. He was in several successful Chapel Hill indie rock bands in that time period. I mean, Chapel Hill is one of the big has always been one of the big alternative music scenes in the world.
Yeah, when college radio was actually alternative radio, it still kind of is because WKNC still WXYZ still programs great stuff. The Archers of Love show, how was it? Did you enjoy it?
It was fantastic, man. So like I said, I had been introduced to them back in the mid '90s by my brother, and if you've ever heard them, they're a heavier side they're almost a punkier side of indie rock. Although in general, I will say,
but they have hooks and melody.
They have hooks, but they are not it's not mild music. It's
Correct.
pretty aggressive at times for that style. In fact, at the end of the show, I said to my pal who went with him, I was like, I was appreciative of the Archers of Loaf for reminding me about when indie and alternative rock was closer to the Buzzcocks than it is to Captain and Tennille, which is the case of this day and age. Like when I go to like a hopscotch and see some of what they call alternative bands, they're so mild and just devoid of any kind of energy or intensity that I want to fall asleep and curl up on the floor.
And it's not that it's like emo or shoegaze, those sorts of subgenres of punk or alternative music. It's I don't know how to. I know exactly what you're talking about. It lacks. I don't want to say it lacks heart or like spirit, but it's not aggro. And it's like when punk and metal needs to be a little aggro, it's got to be a little bit in your face, and it's like nice to enjoy a craft beer too. But you know what I mean.
Right. But it's not exciting.
You're not going to get a circle pit going.
Yeah, and that's I'm not saying you would have to that style of music back in the day, but I mean. Like Superchunk, Archers of Loaf.
And you're wearing a hopscotch shirt.
Yeah, I know. I'm like a freaking advertisement for Raleigh.
You're a walking hypocrisy. You're like, hopscotch isn't what it used to be.
Man, I'm not going to touch that. But anyways, it was a really good show. The house, It was a packed house. They sounded fantastic. They're extremely energetic. They're old bastards. It's great to see them up there still just performing at a high level.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really good show. Really good show. They have a new song out called Raleigh Days too.
Oh yeah, I heard that. It was on YouTube. Yeah, please just Google it, man. It's
actually quite a good song.
For a lot of most bands sort of like lose that flavor and edge as they get older, and they have kept it together, and it's like true to their sound. But let's talk a little bit about Eldritch Horror, man. Your band, Eldritch Horror. I've been saying it very quickly. When did the band first get together? How did that come about? Like was it
high school, man? So
and you're from Raleigh.
I'll give you I was actually born in California, but right. I'm more or less a Raleigh boy. Yeah, California, Raleigh. I did live a couple of years. I did a couple of years up in Ellicott City, Maryland.
Oh, it was Maryland. That's right.
Middle of high school. I was terrible, and after just being epically awful in ninth grade, I went up and lived with my dad and my stepmother in Maryland, and went to high school up there. The idea was going to whip me into shape, and I was going to come back like a straight A student.
Right.
That didn't really pan out. I would say my grades did slightly. I was the worst student, by the way, in high school.
Okay.
The worst. I just was very rebellious. I never went to school. I skipped constantly. And I was just classic BS, broken home, like chip on my shoulder. I mean, the funny thing is both my parents were awesome and very loving, and my stepmother were all awesome and loving. But, sometimes it's a bad combination. You take a teenager, you're already predisposed towards like acting like a jackass, and then you just throw any reason that sort of validates that jackassery that you have going on, and then there you go. Just
and then
sit back and watch and just
Eldritch
wait till
Horror
they
gets formed out of that, right?
This did, in some indirect way, result in Eldritch Horror. I was listening to metal before I moved to Maryland. It's connected with me moving to Maryland. I moved to Maryland before 10th grade. Didn't know anybody. My one cool possession, besides some my records, my Maiden records, was an Iron Maiden tour shirt, and so I wore that as often as I could. And through that shirt, as you were talking before about like identifying people,
right? I
was befriended by a guy named Greg. He's like, cool shirt, and you're like, thanks, and then you're friends, right? And that's how high school
immediately,
was.
Yeah.
And so I fell in with Greg, and his best pals were this guy Gordy, this guy Jason, another guy named Ryan.
These are more metalheads?
And they were all metalheads, right? And so this is obviously in the 80s. This is pre-internet. It was, you learned about music through people.
Exactly.
Period. Yeah.
Going through somebody's cassette collection.
Yeah.
And kind of learning what they like.
And these guys, so like the guy Greg I originally befriended, he was mostly into the same kind of stuff I was, stuff like Maiden and stuff like that. But just because that's all I'd been really exposed to is this more straightforward heavy metal. And then he had some of his friends were also listening to thrash metal and speed metal. And this is in sort of the golden era of that that music style. And so rapidly I was turned on to like Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Death Angel, stuff like Creator, Sodom. One of the guys in the crew, Jason.
Sodom. Damn, I haven't thought about them in a while.
German thrash metal. One of my favorite bands, honestly. One of the guys in the group, Jason, this guy Jason was he was tapped into the underground demo tape scene.
Oh, okay.
He had all these like demo tapes from all these bands that you'd never heard of.
So like every weekend he'd be like, "Hey man, I just
show up at school, man."
Monday morning and be like, "Check this out."
Yeah. Yeah, and it was bizarre stuff with offensive names and offensive song titles.
I bet, is that
the
first time you ever
always
heard?
listening to his Walkman. He always had to something, and he would dub you something. He'd make you a tape. I'd make his tape, and he made me a recording of like Death. The first time I heard the band Death was Jason. This guy Jason gave me a cassette recording of their first album.
Oh wow!
And I heard that, and I was like, "Whoa, what the fuck is?" I had no point of reference for this.
It ain't the Jackson 5.
There's nothing like that, you know. Even within metal, it was incredibly extreme sounding, so he was like our gateway to all these really underground. And he was listening to much more underground stuff than that. Most of the bands we were listening to through Jason were not on record labels. He would just send, you know, in an underground zine, it'd be like, send $3 to so-and-so in Santiago, Chile for their
compilation
thrash death metal band called whatever, and you'd send them $3 in the mail. You just put $3 bills, $1 bills, or some quarters in an envelope, and you'd send it to this Chile.
And a week later.
And then like a month later, usually you'd get this cassette tape, and you'd like listen to it, you know. Here's the way it worked. When you got the envelope with the cassette in it back, it would have not only the cassette and a letter written in broken English probably to you saying, "Thank you for ordering our tape," but then it'd be stuffed full of ads. That was the thing that made the underground scene go around was these little tiny cut out photocopied, like Xeroxed ads that were like, you know, maybe 1 by 2 inches, and would say, and they were ads for other bands' demos and for underground zines and things like that. And so you stuffed every letter you sent out full of all these different ads you had.
Right.
And then
they're like handbills, but they're
multiples
smaller
of them. So you'd have like 10 for the same thing. You'd stuff 10 of them in there for 50 different things and just jam them in there. And then when you got that, you get all the ads out of the envelope. You'd look through those and maybe order some other stuff. But then when you ordered stuff, you'd send out ads in the order too for other things.
Oh.
And so this is enabled, that's how the underground tape trading scene worked.
Oh,
These ads would be in everything you went, you'd send them out and they'd bring them in, and they would expose, it was like the internet for the metal,
80s,
for death metal and underground metal music and tons of. Anyways,
no, that's fine. No, how did you get? So how did this all evolve into Eldritch Horror? How did that?
My best friend up there was this guy Todd. He and I took some like faltering steps towards forming a band.
Did he play guitar, or
he played guitar as well as I did? We both played guitar, and we were most interested in. We listened to all this stuff, and we went to concerts and stuff. But we were most interested in these death metal-y bands and bands like Sodom and Creator that were straddling the line. Sepultura. Bands like that was straddling the line between thrash metal and death metal. And
even Corrosion of Conformity had that, like...
Well, we listened to Corrosion of Conformity, and I was first listening to them when I was living in Maryland.
Yeah.
Not even immediately knowing that they were from
Raleigh. Yeah.
When I went back to Raleigh. So then a funny story is I ended up back in Raleigh because I got in trouble with the law during the summer before my senior year of high school and had to stay in Raleigh. So I had made these great friends in Maryland and had to stay in Raleigh. So basically came back to high school in Raleigh before my senior year, a stranger again. I had like 2 friends. I was all into this music. So I was this weird dude with all these bizarre patches that no one knew what the hell I was talking about, the music I was listening to.
Oh, wow. So 1 second before we, I just want to touch on this a little bit. Not to say that there wasn't a metal scene already in Raleigh.
There was definitely a metal scene.
There's definitely a metal scene there, but you're bringing flavor that's like you guys have like sort of curated in Maryland and bringing it to Raleigh. So who were the guys that you finally hooked up with for Eldritch Horror?
Well, the first person, and I befriended some people, and would listen to music with some people at school. But an old friend of mine, a guy named Mike Rubel, who was in the story before I moved to Maryland, he was the friend who first turned me on to heavy metal music. Back when we were playing D&D together. It's a story as old as time. Playing D&D in the early 80s.
And listening to metal music.
Like in 1984, listening to metal and listening to Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and playing D&D. Anyway, fast forward to when I'm back during my senior year of high school, I get this call out of the blue from this dude named Dennis, no internet, of course, again. Hey, my name is Dennis. I work at Kmart with your pal Mike Rubel. And he told me you might be looking for someone to jam with. And I was like, oh, cool, yeah. And that was that, right?
Yeah.
Because I had run into Mike Rubel after I got back. We didn't really hang out much anymore, but I'd seen him and he knew I played guitar now and was interested in playing music with somebody.
He just happened to, you should talk to David Price. I got his number here.
And so he knew this. So Dennis had worked there. Dennis had just moved down here from Massachusetts. He's from Massachusetts. He'd moved down here, didn't really know anyone, had long hair, just like me. We both had really long hair. And he was looking for people to jam with. Mike gave him my number. He came over. We had our little practice amps, and we played Metallica songs on our guitars. And then like a week later, I was like, "Hey man," called him up. I was like, this band Death is playing in Charlotte with this band Carcass opening for him. Do you want to go? And he was like, "Sure." And
I like how your voice was deeper back then.
Yeah, it was deeper. I was much more vigorous.
Yeah. You guys go to Charlotte and check out
We go to Charlotte and check out the show, and it was cool because part of it is because he had a car. I didn't have a car. So we drove down to Maryland. We'd known each other a week. And we drove down to Charlotte, went to this random weird little club. There were about 40 people there. There was nobody there. Death was playing in their height of their majesty. They were fantastic. Opening for him was just at the time a very, 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 very underground band called Carcass from England, who has since gone on to become quite a very popular one of the best death metal bands ever. They were also unbelievably good live, and it was a great show. And I think
that lit the fire under you guys.
It kind of lit the fire. Like we were already jamming a little bit together, and then we just said we're going to form a band, and then it just kind of became death metal. I was mostly into that. Dennis was getting more into that. And he'd already been exposed to that kind of music at home in Massachusetts a little bit. And so he knew about it. And he got more and more into it. And we decided we're going to form a band. We needed a drummer. I was like, there's this guy at my high school, Athens Drive, John Placco, this dude, he's like a year younger than me, but they say he's a good drummer, man. You go get this guy. So I'm just doing the dippy teenager voice.
I totally get it. So how did you come up with the name Eldritch Horror?
Eldritch Horror, because I was a fan of am a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, the author.
Yep.
And he used this word Eldritch in various of his stories. It's an English word. It's an archaic word. It means weird or unearthly or strange. And I remember reading it in his stories and looking it up in the dictionary because I'd never heard of it before. And once we all decided we're going to start a band and we started writing songs, then we were looking for a name. And I came up with Eldritch and just tacked horror onto the end of it. And there we go. That was our name. We had some other ideas, and that was the one that we all liked, even though it was very hard to say.
Eldritch
Horror. If you're at a loud party in 1990,
it's Eldritch Horror.
People were like, no one knew what the hell your name was.
The witch is what?
Yeah,
exactly. No, it's Eldritch.
It didn't matter. Our name was always printed incorrectly on often in the
like they thought you were some sort of Mexican band, Eldritch.
It would often be Eldridge. It would be Eldridge.
Because that's a common name in the area, Eldridge.
So that's how it came about, and now there's a fucking board game.
A board game. But there was Eldritch Horror, the band, before there was ever Eldritch Horror, the board game.
Our band name dates to 1990. That board game is probably 6 years old.
Have you ever thought about sending them a cease and desist?
We actually joked about that. It's a great game, by the way.
Yeah.
But basically, it doesn't matter. We're doing completely different things. We're a band. We're playing music. That is a board game. It would be if we were.
How little did you know it would play a a role later in your life?
It's very funny that theme would come up later again in my life. But our name was Eldritch Horror. It was a very unusual name then. You can't throw a stick without hitting something that's called Eldritch these days, especially in the gaming world. Very irritating, man. It's really fucking irritating.
It just pisses me
Eldritch
off.
Layers. There's always some D&D book that's got Eldritch in it. No,
The Eldritch Dog Bed, now from Ramco.
Yeah, exactly. It's just around the corner.
You love H.P. Lovecraft? It's like
Your
so does
dog will too.
Wow, man. Like the metal scene has changed a lot, right? I mean, from when you started, I mean, it's different, right? I mean, is it because...
It's different, but it's strangely...
It's eerily the same because it's even though the people get older, it's like the people who come out, it's like it's sort of the same crowd, right? It's like the same type of people-ish? Or not?
No. Well, yes and no. I will say this, man. I love the music that my band plays, and I'm a huge believer in my band. I'm a true believer in my band that the songs we write are good.
I believe in you too, Dave.
And, I know that sounds cheesy, man, but
no,
you
have to
be
your own
passionate
advocate
about what you do. And
why half-ass it? I mean,
I'm not half-assing it. I care about what we do. I believe in the songs that we play, that they're good fucking songs, and that we take it very seriously when we play live. And we have a lot of fun. We're very relaxed dudes, but we're not half-assed about preparing. So the cool thing that I've noticed is that we reformed this band in 2014, I think. That's when we came out of the woodwork after breaking up in 1994. So just 20 years. And the very cool thing... We all kind of wanted to see if we could still do it.
Yeah.
And the cool thing.
And what year was this? When did you guys?
That was 2014.
When did you guys start? You started
1990.
in 1990.
It was like January. It was the first week of January.
Okay.
Because it was the weekend after New Year's Eve that we practiced our first practice. We did get together 2 times after that to do reunion shows for benefits for. One was a benefit for a friend of ours who died tragically and poor, and he was very poor, and they did a show to put a gravestone on his grave. He'd been dead a number of years and it was in an unmarked...
He just had a place marker, yeah?
It was in an unmarked grave, so a friend of ours, Earthworm, set up a show.
How metal of you guys, though, right? I mean, like, you know what I mean? It's like,
I would love...
Let's do a benefit for his gravestone. That is pretty... we'll drink
metal.
one. Here's what's your friend's name?
Well, the guy who's the dead guy,
yeah.
His name is Dave. David as well. And Little Dave is what they call him.
Scotch to Dave.
And this was...
sorry. Just enjoying a little
scotch. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, this is an old story. Anyone who's familiar with the Raleigh music scene would know the story, and I'm not going to rehash it, but it was a very tragic and brutal moment in the Raleigh music scene in the early 90s. So Earthworm, who's the singer of Old Codger.
Old Codger, yeah.
He set up that show to do that, and he coaxed us. That was a good reason for us to come out, and so we did a couple of little reunion shows over the years. We kind of had an inkling that we could maybe still do it. I had been a heavy smoker though in between that last reunion show until
the voice was not up to par, ready to.
It was tough. I quit smoking to do Eldritch Horror again because you can probably smoke cigarettes and sing death metal when you're like 19 years old. I didn't. I mean, when I started Eldritch Horror, I stopped smoking. I think you can't be a good death metal singer. I'm sure someone's going to be like, bullshit, this guy. I'm sure there's some freak of nature out there who smokes a pack a day and is a great death metal singer.
Right.
But I'm sure
he's got the Lemmy gene.
Yeah. But the metal scene's changed. That's what the question was.
Yep.
It's changed in that it's way cooler now, I'd have to say. I miss the being the weird underground thing and playing shows and people like, what the hell is that music?
It's not as esoteric anymore.
It was very secret and weird and that was there was a thrill to that back in the day.
Right.
However, it's a much bigger audience now. And I confess, I don't think that if you had asked me in 1993, would people still be selling out obituary concerts in the year 2019? I would have said, "You're no way."
Right.
Not because I didn't think obituary was great, but just I figured it wouldn't.
It would be a fad.
Thing would have
it would fad out.
Would have changed to a point where people would. It'd still be a fairly underground type of music that few would be listening to.
Right.
But the internet, I'm sure, and I'd say just the musicianship of a lot of the bands contributed to that. And so there's tons of younger people. It's fantastic. Death metal shows are just packed full. We love seeing our old friends, but the most exciting thing about playing in Eldritch Horror now is when we play a show and the place is full of people we don't know, who are in their 20s, who we've never met before.
Right.
And they're there because they listen to death metal and they're into it. And that is awesome because, there's a vibrancy to the death metal and the metal scene in general that just is really exciting to see. People like going to shows. It's changed. Yeah, people mosh less. People, there's just differences in how people act. It's better. There are more women there. It's a more diverse crowd. That's better.
That's true.
It used to be a sausage party at a lot of these death metal shows back in the day. And, that's not because the music isn't appealing to a wide variety of people. It's just because it was fewer people were exposed to it back in the day.
And it becomes a very niche, and niches can be driven very hard by those white men. Like they love to you talk about tabletop gaming and the D&D nerd, in the basement playing D&D. I mean,
all of it, man.
I mean, comic books too. It's like those guys create a niche, and then for women are just like, I enjoy it too, and they get snubbed, or they did get snubbed, and now it's like so much. And I'm so glad that we've turned that corner because it dies if you don't. Yeah. If you don't, all you do is keep expanding to the same old grognards, it's going to just die off.
I absolutely agree. And for the record, we have never been proponents of that gatekeeping mentality with our music style. Did I like that it was a secretive type of music? Sure, in the early days. But if a person who didn't look like me came up to me and was like, tell me about these bands, I would never have been like, oh, you're not cool enough. I would have been like, here's some I'll record you some tapes. Yeah. Let's go to see some bands, I've always personally been very open to different types of people, and I'm just excited to see the scene is that way now. Well, it's a great scene in Raleigh that we have.
It is. It's a great scene. And I read an interview with Henry Rollins recently, and one of the questions was, what do you think your role is now in punk music? And he said, to get out of the fucking way, to let these guys come in and do their thing. Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and try to gatekeep these people or tell them that their music is shit. He goes, it's going to change, and it's going to evolve. And he goes, and it's not my job. He goes, if anything, I'll cultivate it as much as I can. But for the most part, just let them just get out of the fucking way and let them do it. You know? Speaking of shows, you were talking about shows earlier. You got a new bass player, you got a new guitar player, and you got a show coming up. I just want you to get a plug in for that.
June 13th.
That's right.
The Raleigh Death Fest 2020.
And that is at the Maywood in Raleigh.
June 13th. It's an all-day affair. We're playing last. It's an honor to be playing. We played Death Fest before. Our good friend Alan, who is a member of Datura, is responsible for putting this bill together, and he's a huge part of the Raleigh music scene and keeping it awesome. And there always being exciting shows to go to and to play at. So we're super thrilled to be playing. We haven't played a show. At that point, it'll have been over a year since we played a show because we've taken a hiatus while we've been writing. We took a hiatus
new
from
music
playing shows. Yeah, we were really hoping to have a new album released before Death Fest. It's not impossible. I think it's pretty unlikely that'll happen now, just because
it's not impossible. It's just
life.
improbable.
We're old bastards, like I said many times. Everyone in the band except for Tyler. And when Adam's pretty young too. He's sort of middle between Tyler and the rest. Tyler's quite a young man. But he does have a child, and the rest of us, John and Dennis and I, all have families, and it's difficult we can't practice as much as we did back in the day. So writing is a slower affair. We have a very democratic process between the three, Dennis and John and I. We write together, and we write. It can take a little longer. We feel it makes the songs better for us, but that's how we do it, and it can be a slow process. We've made a lot of progress. We will be playing several new songs at this show, and we have enough songs to record a new album. By the time that show rolls around, we'll probably have 95% of the work done on the songs, if not 100%. So it'll probably...
A demo tape?
we're going to try to have some sort of recording, some sort of teaser,
limited
or
release or something.
Just something to distribute single? At that show. Yeah, a single.
A single.
That's right. We'll have a single.
And there's like 9 other bands, and we'll
great bands.
And we'll do the plug for all those bands at the end of the show. But if anybody out there has any recommendations for punk or metal bands that we should be listening to, send us an email at cpgbpodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet at us at cpgbpodcast. That's also on Facebook and Instagram as well at CPGB Podcast. Let's switch gears a bit, man. Talk about games for a minute.
Yay, games.
Yay, games. You are the general manager of Game Theory Gaming Store. You used to be my boss there for a hot minute, maybe almost 2 years there, I think.
Yeah, it was almost 2 years.
So how did that come about, man? How did you become the general manager of a tabletop gaming store in Raleigh?
It's a very strange story.
Let's hear
it's
it.
not that strange, honestly. So I had been working, as you said, in corporate. My last job before the game store was I was working at a oncology pharmacy, working in patient assistance. I basically helped people pay for their insanely and sickeningly expensive cancer medications. So it was a good job. It was a stressful job. It was emotionally draining. Basically, I was kind of looking for something else to do. Not managing a retail store, because I had almost zero. I had a little experience working at retail when I was much younger.
Right.
And I had some experience being a gamer quite a while. Hadn't been an avid gamer in quite some time. Mm-hmm. So I dabbled in those worlds, but a little bit. But basically, it's an accident of life. You know, I like Bo King, the owner of Game Theory, was the bass player for Eldritch Horror. When he opened the store, he had moved to the West Coast and made his career out there, working in computers and stuff. And when he moved back to Raleigh, I'm not sure exactly when, but he had moved back to Raleigh, and we had talked on the phone a few times, and I think seen each other. He gave me a call when he opened Game Theory to let me know, hey, I opened this game store. You should come. And he'd never worked at the game store and still doesn't. He owns it. He has his own job still in a computer world.
He staffs it and made sure inventory hits when it, yeah.
All he does is hire a manager
right.
and pays the bills, basically. And that's
he does a lot more than that, of course, but he's basically puts a manager in place. He's the owner.
He's the owner. He does not work.
Which is actually atypical of a lot of game stores because the owners are usually heavily involved, and I think that's why a lot of them go under.
I think that's why a lot of them fail.
Yeah, because they're way too involved.
Way too involved.
So I'll
skip that. So Bo had opened Game Theory. He had reached out to me just to let me know that the store existed. I lived down the street from it. I came over there a couple of times and checked the store out. I went in there once and played D&D once. It was like one of their Adventures League nights. Played, I think it was edition, I don't know. It was whatever edition was out in 2000. You might know.
What year?
2000. Let's say 2012, 2011.
Well, that was fourth.
Fourth. It was all I know.
Started
it was terrible. I hated it. I hated everything about it. The people were nice. Like the people I was playing.
It was the mechanics of the game. It was probably fourth edition.
It was stupid.
It was fourth edition,
and it was nothing like D&D.
Because you liked fifth edition when you played it one time.
Fifth edition's fine.
Okay,
it's a little hand-holdy.
We'll talk about that in a moment, Dave.
But
we'll talk about your love-hate relationship with Dungeons and Dragons in a minute.
Because I'm old and shitty. But yeah, so I knew the store existed, and that was pretty much it. And so I went in there. I thought it was cool, but I was still not actively gaming that much. He opened the store because he had always stayed into gaming. Had been going to one of the, I think it's Games People Play, or I don't remember the name of the store. It was some store in Cary.
It's no longer
Hobby Masters.
Hobby Masters.
That's the name of the store. And I never went there. He told me he'd gone there. It was great, but he remembered going there and thinking, I could think of ways to do this better. So he opened his business. So fast forward to 2014, we reformed Eldritch Horror. We were practicing regularly. For a while, we were practicing in Bo's basement. He has a large basement with like a soundproofed area in there. Early on, this never came up. We never talked about game theory much. But it hit a point where he started telling us all, me and Dennis, and he was just like, hey, and John, and you guys, look, I'm looking for someone to manage Game Theory. I need a new manager. None of us were interested. We all had jobs that we were dedicated to, and we were all like, no, we're not interested. Every couple of months or so, Bo would bring it up, and then, hey, man. And then he started zeroing in on me because he figured out that I was least happy in my current job.
Oh, he exposed your weakness.
He could just tell by me talking about my job and stuff that he's like, well, Dave isn't completely happy. I don't know. That's how it felt.
And he probably was going, cool. What's it going to take to get Dave off of that job? Yeah.
So he basically was like real serious. He's like, I'm serious. I seriously want you to come manage the store. Nobody protested more than I did. I was like, I don't have the experience. I've never managed a store. I don't, I'm not actively a gamer. I don't know the games, blah, blah, blah. I gave him every reason.
But everybody who opened a store around that time was in the same space. None of those people had ever run a store before.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like
I didn't know, man.
No. I mean, I'm just telling you that. Don't feel like man, I can't do this. This is not going to work.
Well, exactly.
I mean, that you were kind of like shooting on yourself.
Yeah.
I shouldn't do that, and I should do this instead. Because all these, I've been to a lot of these game stores. You don't even like go to other game stores hardly, but I've been to them, man. And like the owner being too involved, they treat it like a boys' club hangout.
Yep.
All of these things, they don't treat it like retail. It's like all of these problems with these game stores. You come to it with a professional attitude, and I think that's what you brought to Game Theory. I mean, and we're not going to sit here and like glad hand each other about how awesome Game Theory is, but that's a successful store, and it has a lot to do with you.
We've been very successful. We've been very successful, and I'm really, really happy. I ultimately made the decision after literally months of just agonizing over if this is the right move for me. I finally came to the conclusion that if I had gone back in time and said to talk to 15-year-old David and said, hey, your good friend owns a game store and is offering you a job managing a game store where you're going to be, constantly around Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer and crap like that. My 15-year-old self would murder me if I said no to that. So
well, what am I doing now? Oncology patients who are terminal? It's like,
yeah, which I loved it, man. I loved that job, but it is emotionally draining. You can only talk to so many elderly people about their loved one who's dying, is going to die.
Right.
And you're trying to get the medication that can extend their life for 2 years.
That's absolutely.
And it costs some obscene amount of money, like $30,000 a month or something stupid like that. And you're trying to figure out a way to afford it so that their loved one can live a few more years.
Right.
It wears you down. Because it's an obscene situation.
So in a way, you were happy to make that transition, right? I mean, and it was 2000. I think it was right when 5th edition came out, because I believe
it was right. 5th edition had come out.
Yep.
The starter set, I think, was the first thing they released. It was out. We had it in the store. I think the Dungeon.
I'm sorry, we're talking about 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons came out right around the time I start. So as much as I want to say to myself, I'm the reason
that the store is successful. I'd like to think I'm the reason the store is successful. I'll tell you why. No, I'm just kidding. Here's an opportunity for me to tell you why I think the store is successful. I mean, why I think it was successful. But first of all, I just want to say, when the 5th edition Player's Handbook came out, I took my Player's Handbook from my AD&D Player's Handbook that I have, one of the original 1st edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or actually one of the 1st edition Player's Handbooks, with the orange cover, not the white. I know that's a different, right? Yeah. Orange on the inside cover. And I took it up to the store to take a picture beside the new 5th edition one when I was in the store. That day, you had like about, I don't know, a third of the board games on the floor, because you were like, we're going to switch this up. Because I think when I had gone to there previously, shit was everywhere. Right. And it didn't seem like it had rhyme or reason. I think you were in the middle of putting rhyme or reason.
Alphabetizing them.
Alphabetizing the store, getting board games where board games should be, getting miniature wargaming where those should be. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you were in the middle of that chaos. And I remember like buying the 5th edition book on the way out, or some miniatures or something, and chatting with you. I'm like, hey man, we're putting together an AD&D group if you want to do it. You're like, oh sure, yeah, no problem. And I never heard from you. I think I may have emailed you a couple of times about it, and you're like, oh, I'm just too busy right now, man. I got a lot going on. But I saw the sausage being made, and that's like the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
And then later, of course, when I was having all these back surgeries and everything, and I was just trying to like find a job, you were kind enough to fucking hire me, man.
Yeah.
Which really means a lot to me, because it allowed me to get back into the idea of like working again and like feeling better and all of that.
You're a great employee.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's why it hurt so bad when I had to fire you.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Sucks, man.
That's not true.
I know.
It didn't hurt. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't fire him.
Why did Ryan leave? Let's leave that question hanging. If you'd like to know, email me at cpgbpodcast@gmail.com. Oh. I will tell you why I left the store.
It wasn't because he didn't like working there.
So you've been doing this since 2014-ish or 13-ish.
15.
14,
I don't
15?
know, man. When you're in your late 40s, the years just run past.
Right.
I don't know. I could have been done this for 20 years.
So, but it's been about 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, been 5 or 6 years.
So, I mean, in that short amount of time, what kind of trends have you seen in gaming?
I mean, there's so many micro trends within individual styles of gaming, but this is one of the things I attribute the success of gaming to. The way I look at games like tabletop gaming is I look at it as being four main types of gaming. There's role-playing, like Dungeons & Dragons. There's board games, like Settlers of Catan.
Yep.
And there are games, like Warhammer 40,000.
Yep.
And then there are...
collectible card games.
Collectible card games like Magic the Gathering.
And that's basically, essentially how the market is broken up when they release their market report every year.
That's the main styles of gaming. Right now, and for several years now, all 4 of those elements are pumping top quality products out at a ridiculous rate.
And a lot of that has to do with like Kickstarter too. We were talking about the trend of Kickstarter.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Kickstarter, I think it's difficult to see exactly which came first, the chicken or the egg, but Kickstarter is definitely accelerating that growth with, especially I think I see it most with board games.
Gloomhaven is a classic example.
Gloomhaven's a classic example. It's considered by Board Game Geek and many board game reviewers to be the best board game ever made.
It's too many pieces, man.
And
just too many fucking pieces.
It's hugely expensive, and it started as a Kickstarter.
And it weighs 20 pounds.
It literally weighs, I think it's 21 pounds, the box does. It's an involved game.
Do these look familiar?
Oh, these are the inserts.
Yeah.
So
just to let you know that like our mic stands are sitting on a buffer so that if we bump the table, it doesn't make a sound. And it's styrofoam panels that are about an inch thick that came out of the inside of the Gloomhaven packaging that they shipped, because those things weigh 20 pounds a piece.
Normally when we order stuff for the store, like stock, it's like a box. You open a box and there's 10 games in there. There's a bunch of other stuff, paints and
yeah.
And then you open up this box. You open the box and it's just one
Gloomhaven
copy of Gloomhaven. In there. It fits exactly in there.
And think about like the headache of having to stock something like that in a retail environment.
Yeah. So Kickstarter enables people to have, imaginative and creative people, and now companies too. It's not just people. Some of the game companies kickstart their own games. It allows people to kind of go crazy and come up with an idea that maybe isn't the kind of thing that a boardroom full of pencil neck, suits are going to say, this is a great marketing idea. How about a 21-pound game that costs $140 that has got 5,000 pieces that once you take them out of the box, you can't fit them out of the box.
And it feels a little bit like role-playing, but it's not really role-playing. It's really a board game.
How could you sell that? Yeah, you could never sell that.
At a pitch meeting, it sounds terrible.
Couldn't pitch it. You put the guy who designed it, Isaac Childers, I believe, came up with the idea and designed the game. Mechanics were super solid. Put it on Kickstarter. People were captured by the passion of his project and donated huge amounts of money to it. He made the game. The game delivered on every front, and there you go, a success story. Huge success story. So Kickstarter is like a main line into like this sort of the most extreme parts of the gaming world,
Yeah.
I think. So I back some games on behalf of the store because some
okay.
some Kickstarters have retail levels that are only accessible to if you
And
can
that's a
prove
new
that
thing.
you're a retail
That's
store.
a new thing that they've just started doing too. Yeah.
They've been doing it. They're becoming more and more popular. So I kickstart games on behalf of the store from time to time. I try to be real picky. I try to go with things that I'm more calculating with it than I would be if it was my own money. Like I might be a little more like take more chances if it was my own personal money, but I'm trying to go for the sure things.
Right.
And it is super exciting.
You're gambling with Bo's money.
Yeah. Yeah. Like bet it all on, whatever. This game, it's about a bunch of whale hunters, in a cosmic dimension. It's like, yeah, that sounds great.
Let it ride on the cyber whale hunters.
Exactly.
So yeah,
you're right that kickstarting is it's informing all aspects of gaming, of tabletop gaming, and in largely a positive way, I would say. But the big story to me is that all 4 cylinders of that gaming engine are running at peak efficiency right now. Magic the Gathering has been around. It's the oldest, longest running card game, and it is still the most powerful force in gaming.
And it keeps the lights on. Isn't that essentially what, you know what? I think you once told me that board games had almost eclipsed sales of Magic the Gathering cards at one point, or it was closing in on it at some point.
Yeah, I would say that there have been times, and again, my period of experience in this is
6 years.
Relatively narrow compared to many people who've been managing stores like this for years.
Right, but you actually capture data.
Yeah, I do. And so the situation has undoubtedly changed, but from what I have seen and what I do at Game Theory is I try not to concentrate all of our
eggs in one basket.
Yeah, I don't
you
put our
diversify
eggs in one basket.
your portfolio.
I try to concentrate on all the different styles of gaming at our store.
Right.
If Magic the Gathering ceased to operate, would it have a profound effect on all game stores? Absolutely, it would.
Yep.
It would be a negative thing, and I don't know what would happen. But we have a better chance of surviving it now than we would have 5 years ago. I'll just say that
Because you have put eggs in other baskets. Yeah,
we'd probably have to move back to that small store behind the Harris Teeter. But
when I was there, you had I think I tried to count, and there were over 1,000 board game titles. Just board games. And Magic the Gathering cards, like inventory wise, over 100,000 easy.
Oh, way more than that.
Way more than that.
Yeah,
like
way more
approaching 2 now, probably. And then and then like RPGs, and then let's talk a bit about like how Wizards of the Coast has changed the experience of a tabletop gaming store from the way that Magic the Gathering is received and played by everybody, that they create Friday Night Magic. They have marketed this whole concept. They've kept the game fresh. They continue to renew it and repopulate the game without making it a fad or making it feel dull. And it keeps bringing people back to it and bringing new people into it.
They keep it fresh, and it has to do with solid game mechanics. Number one.
Yep.
The game itself was designed by Richard Garfield. It's a masterwork of
92, I think.
Relatively simple at the time.
And it was created to play in between D&D sessions.
That's how it was marketed to me when back in the mid 90s, I bought a couple of packs of Magic cards. They had them up by the register for people, you were in there shopping for real games. And then, hey, we got this little novelty thing. It's this little card game. You can play it while you're waiting on.
But this
your
was a
D&D
hobby
game to
store
start.
because there was no such thing as a tabletop gaming store back in the 90s. There were very few.
They existed, but they were few and far between.
But they typically had models, model planes, model tanks, and that sort of thing, and remote control cars. And it was more of a hobby shop. Whereas now it's become so much more niche and so much more specific about that.
Yeah.
But you're right, Magic the Gathering, what they created in the early 90s has vastly changed the landscape of how collectible card games are played. And Wizards of the Coast, also purchasing Dungeons and Dragons, has also changed the landscape. How has D&D, coming from first edition to the 5th edition now, I mean, that's blown up, right?
Yeah, so when I jumped into game theory as a player before I became the manager and played 4th edition D&D, unbeknownst to me, I discovered what apparently many other D&D players had discovered, and that 4th edition was not very good. The 4th edition of Dungeons & Dragons was not very good.
They tried to write it for video gamers. They were like, okay, our competition is video games, so we need to make this as customizable as possible. And then when they realized that it sucked, Mike Merles and Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins essentially said, look, this is a tabletop game. Let's honor original AD&D, right? I mean, isn't that how you felt? That
Right. Like I came into the store and jumped into this midstream when it was all happening, and 5th edition D&D was coming out, and it was out, but all the books had not been put out yet. Like I remember the Dungeon Master's Guide releasing when I started managing, and it's been fascinating to watch this once mighty behemoth just stand up and take its place atop the mountain heap of role-playing games. Its rightful place, I would add. Because I am a D&D enthusiast.
Same here.
And I miss 3. So I never played 3rd edition D&D. I played 4th edition D&D once. I've looked at both of them, despise them. I don't want anything to do with them. 5th edition D&D, they made a concerted effort to take the right things, the things that they had done right in the 3rd and 4th edition, which there's no way you put out a whole edition of a game and it's all bad.
Right.
There's good stuff in there. They took the good stuff from what I've seen, and then they took all the good stuff, a lot of the good stuff from the earlier editions. Younger players today have a very weird view of what original D&D is. They're like, oh, this is when your dwarf was, I have a 4th level dwarf. And you're like, you don't really know what you're talking about. But that's cool because I also make fun of Fallout Boy like that because I think it's super lame, or whatever music you listen to. And I say some cockamamie joke about it based on not any real knowledge
of it, right.
So fair enough. But
just being an old grognard.
But there are a lot of good things about 1st and 2nd edition D&D
that they brought into 5th edition.
They sort of reinfused that sort of a feeling into it from what I've seen. And so they kind of captured the best of both worlds, the old and the new. And all I can say is that they got it right.
And the organized play program, the Adventures League
program.
They really... They kind of screwed the pooch a year ago or 2 years ago, maybe, when they changed up some of the rules about how it was played. However, the basis of what they were doing is bringing people in the stores to play D&D and at conventions, and that allows people to experience it for the first time.
They've done an incredibly good job of marketing their game.
Of course, Dungeons and Dragons being owned by Wizards of the Coast, who's owned by Hasbro, and they also own Magic the Gathering. They also change the way a store looks. Can you explain to us like how that works? Or I mean, I know it's
I'll try to
give us a very high level.
This could derail us because it's a pretty long topic, but
it used to
Wizards of the Coast set up a new set of criteria that game stores. You know, if you're an official, what they call WPN store, that means you're a store that's allowed...
Wizards Player Network.
Allowed to host Magic and Dungeons & Dragons official events, things that are sanctioned, and there's a software you use to report the results of events.
Right.
You're an official store that you're stocking these products and you're hosting official events, and in return, you get things like promotional materials, promotional cards for Magic that you can distribute to your players.
Early releases of adventures to play in the store that other people can't play and stuff. Yeah,
all kinds of cool stuff that you want and that your players desperately want. And so you do this. Every game store has got to be a WPN store in this era. There's no way you cannot do that and be successful.
Right.
So we've always been that.
But there are certain levels of WPN.
They set up a new level called WPN Premium, which is basically just... Here, they give you a huge list. You don't have to go for it. You can stay at the level you're at, no problem. But here is, if you do these things...
And this is kind of above and beyond, because it used to be on like what your sales were, or if you complied with a few things. But now they took it to a completely different level.
Yeah, it is related to sales and stuff. You have to be a store that's selling a lot and popular, has a lot of players there too. and I don't know how exactly they crunch those numbers, but there's a lot that goes into it. But there are a whole lot of cosmetic things you need to, you know.
And how has that changed the store?
It's changed the look of our store in that we put a huge amount of effort into buying new tables, buying new chairs, framing pictures, signage, cleaning. We've always prided ourselves on being a pretty clean store. And if anyone who's been...
Everybody has always said that.
Yeah, if you've been to game stores in your life, many people probably have the impression of a game store as having you go to the bathroom and it's like that scene in Train Spotting with the nastiest toilet in Scotland or whatever, who dives in looking. That's kind of the impression you always get of a game store.
Right.
But we've always prided ourselves on being clean and keeping it clean. But this was like amping that to 11. And it was a whole lot of stuff about how we merchandise and it's a lot of hoops and it's a big pain.
But getting comfortable chairs, like a lot of game stores do the folding chairs and folding tables, that's gone.
It's all gone. And they're just much more permanent looking, more heavy duty, just a little more luxurious, undoubtedly the chairs are more comfortable.
I'm a huge fan with my back. It's like I'm a huge fan of more comfortable chairs.
Yeah.
I think it increases the look of the store. I know it's a out of pocket cost, but I think
it's worth it.
I think it's so worth it because it makes the store look more high end. Mm-hmm. Because you have these like board game cafes that are like popping up even in Raleigh now. There's like 2 or 3 different little like board game cafes that are opening up, and it's like, well, people are there having drinks and playing games, and I think the stores are kind of sort of fighting that. You know, do you want to be a restaurant or you want to be a bar? Do you want to have games in your store? And I think the next phase of all of this is a store that can accomplish all of that. That you can bring people in, have good food, you can have games, but you need to like have people managing a restaurant. You need to have somebody managing the retail side of it. You need to have.
I think you're right. You're absolutely right. It's a new trend, the gaming cafe, relatively new trend, and it's exciting and it's cool. It doesn't really impact us in a negative way. Honestly, having gaming cafes in the Raleigh area has increased our sales
because people will go try out a store there
looking for the games they try.
Exactly, it is a try before you buy sort of situation.
And I don't believe in. My staff has been instructed, and I do not believe in like bad mouthing other local stores or businesses. We never talk any kind of junk about other game stores. We don't talk any junk about other businesses like gaming cafes. We're doing our thing. We're focused on ourselves, and we hope everyone else can be successful. That's great.
Well, here's an opportunity.
And so what ends up happening is, some of those stores recommend us as a place to buy stuff. You're right, though. There is a future where you could do all the things, but you were 100% correct in that you would have to have some degree of separation between the parts.
Yep.
Because Mr. Miyagi, I often hearken to his wisdom of if you walk one side of the road, you're fine. Walk the other side of the road, you're fine. You walk the middle of the road, squish like a grape. And if you try to run everything under one umbrella and one management team and one set of employees, I think you're going to get squished like a grape. Yeah. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sure someone has perfected it, but that's an exciting area of gaming stores and stuff. The growth of the market is pretty exciting. And
I believe this is an opportunity. If you'd like to give a shout out to your employees that work at Game Theory, now would be a good time if you want to say
they're all great. I don't want to just list all my employees, but I have a great staff.
Yeah.
You were saying earlier that we've had all the success and it's been a big part. Have I been a part of it? Yeah, I think so. But my staff is a huge part of that. Yep. I have a fantastic staff, fantastic group of employees. They love games. They love gaming. We have most of them. They're all welcoming people. They care about the games. They care about welcoming people into the hobby. And we look forward to people coming in the store and meeting us. And it's a great group of people. I'm very excited that I have them.
It's nice that you have built a team that has actually been so dedicated at what they do, because finding people who are good at retail and also good at knowing the games and recommending games, that's a really hard Venn diagram to put together, isn't it?
It's very hard. That's the hardest thing.
Because people think, I love to play games, I would like to work in a game store. And that's not the case.
It doesn't work out.
That doesn't get the toilets clean.
We've definitely had failures with that, where we've hired people and it just didn't work out. Doesn't make them a bad person. It just, their expectations are not maybe always realistic.
Yeah.
It's a job, you're working a job.
Yep.
Can it be fun? Hell yeah, it can be fun. Is it, honestly, it's a really nice place to work. I really enjoy working there most of the time. I look forward to going in. I hope my staff feels like that. I'm sure they have times where they're overworked or underappreciated or something like that. They feel that way, and I hope not.
On my behalf, out of the thousands of bosses I've worked for in my life, I have to say, man, you rank right up there, up top with the best of them. I'm going to give you a low five or a high five. No, I mean, really. And Roseanne, my wife, would always say, you're lucky you work for David Price. Well, and I was like, yeah, you're right. But we didn't know. Oh my goodness, Dave, you hear that music?
Oh, wait, is it?
It's time, Dave.
Jonas Brothers? Why?
It's time once again for everybody's favorite quiz show, Magic the Gathering card or metal band. David, I'm going to read you 5 words or phrases, and you must tell me if it is the name of a Magic the Gathering card or the name of a metal band. Now, you have not seen these names before. I have not shown them to you, correct?
You have not shown them to me.
That's right. I have not prompted you in any way prior to this, correct?
No, you have not.
We are counting on your vast knowledge of metal bands and your vast knowledge of Magic the Gathering.
Jesus Christ. You're setting me up for a huge failure.
I mean, there's only like 200,000 of them, right?
Sure, I've got them all memorized, right? Got them on a little crib sheet on my...
All right, so here's your first one. Neckrite. And I will spell it for you.
Can you use it in a sentence?
I cannot. And it could be it could be necrite. It is Necrite.
I believe Ryan.
It's like a necrotic. Talk it out a little bit. Does it sound? What does it sound like? Or like
necrite?
Yeah, I mean,
necrite. It sounds like an Australian word. Necrite. It's like a new. It means like kraken. Oh, necrite. I believe that's a magic card.
You are correct. It is a black creature card. Yeah, man, from 5th edition expansion set. Card text reads, whenever Necrite attacks and isn't blocked, you may sacrifice it. If you do, destroy target creature defending player controls. It can't be regenerated. It has 2 power.
Can I just interject one thing
toughness.
Here about Necrites and magic cards? I don't play magic. I'm not a magic player.
This is exactly right. However, you do put them all in the inventory.
I do put a lot of magic cards, an awful lot of magic cards.
Into the singles inventory.
I can play magic badly.
Wow. This is almost unfair.
So that's it. 1 for 1, right?
You are 1 for 1, David.
100%.
Okay, so here we go. Number 2.
All right.
Bastion. It is Bastin.
A-N.
Bastin. Now, I have cross-referenced these two to make sure that one is not the other. You know what I mean? So they cannot be both.
You've done your homework here. Bastion.
People don't understand.
First of all, this is the name of, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's the name of a orphan boy from one of the Charles Dickens stories. Isn't Bastion?
Like one of Oliver Twist's?
No, is it not? It's not Charles Dickens. It's is it the what's the Never-Ending Story? Isn't that the kid's name? But isn't it Bastion?
I don't know, man.
Bastion, man. That's what this is, right? Okay, so Bastion is the name of the kid in Never-Ending Story, right? And
Bastin, Bastion.
Bastion. And then also there's a quote metal band called Atreyu, which is also a character from Never-Ending Story. And
I love this.
Therefore,
I love the logic.
Cosmic energy leads me to believe that this is a metal band.
You are correct. It is a heavy metal band from Sicily, Italy. Their 2018 full-length album entitled Grimorio.
Grimorio.
Doesn't that sound Italian metal?
Sounds fucking awesome, man.
Grimorio.
I want to go to Sicily and lay on the beach and listen to Grimorio.
Wow. You are 2 for 2.
All right.
You are doing a lot better than Reed normally does at this point.
Well, Reed is, but Reed is... Reed, why are you laughing? He is fun. He's hilarious.
I love it.
I dream of being as funny as this man.
I almost think he misses them on purpose just to make it funnier sometimes. But no, you're doing great. You're 2 for 2, man. We got 3 more to go. Okay, here we go. Number 3, Mantak, and it's spelled M-A-N-T-A-K. It could be, I don't know. I don't know.
M-A-N-T-A-K?
M-A-N-T-A-K.
Sounds like something that like George
Jason-
Costanza's dad designed, like that men would wear. Right? What was that thing called? The man's ear?
The bro.
That's right.
They were arguing if they were going
man's
to
ear or the bro. The
Mantak. M-A-N.
Mantak sounds like a Native American demon or something like that. You know, you could just picture like at Jamestown, all the soldiers were first. The Mantak first took the soldiers, then it took the menfolk.
You're thinking of Kirituk.
No,
the Mantak.
Mantak.
Oh, like some sort of evil.
It's a creature.
Beast.
It's a Mantak. Don't you know about the Mantak?
Oh,
you never
sorry.
heard the legends of Mantak?
Is it like a Wendigo?
I think there was an X-Files episode about, or no, it might have been In Search of Mantak. Because there was this, so that's the creature, right? That's the one where they saw it up in it was somewhere in Pennsylvania. This old man behind a 7-Eleven had seen a Mantak going through the dumpster.
It's like a Sasquatch?
Yeah, he was like, Mantak.
It's like an urban Sasquatch.
I seen a Mantak. And it flew away.
That thing hit me up for money on Western Boulevard one time.
All I know is I woke up, my pants were off, and my wallet was empty. Mantak.
Mantak.
Spell it again.
M-A-N-T-A-K. M-A-N.
I'm going to go with metal band.
That is correct.
Yeah, all right.
It is a Malaysian black metal band formed in 1996. They just released an album this year.
What's it called?
Impurity of the Flesh.
Fuck yeah.
Isn't that...
They sound brutal, man.
It sounds like Mantak.
I'm going to go home and crank up some Mantak and some Bastion.
Somebody made a recommend. Somebody emailed us. Somebody emailed us that we should take all of the metal bands that we've had in the show and create a Spotify playlist so that people can go listen to all of these bands. Do you know what kind of effort that takes?
That's way more effort than Ryan's willing to put in.
Son, I always think it's a great idea every time I hear it, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. All right, here we go.
I'll help you.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Number 4. You're 3 for 3, man. You're killing it.
Do I get you? Are you going to leave a recording on my home answering machine now?
I will do that for you.
Thanks.
Yes.
All right.
I'm Carl Castle now. NPR. Number 4.
That's how cool we are.
Lord of the Pit.
And you're 100% sure this is not both?
I have checked. Well, I mean, according to my sources that I have, which are pretty valid and
using the Encyclopedia Britannica primarily.
Yeah. Lord of the Pit.
And these are all just the normal spellings of Lord. It's not Lorde.
Oh no! It's not
with two T's.
It's not it is a common spelling of all. Lord of the Pit.
Lord of the Pit. So it could be like a thrash, like a crossover thrash punk band that's really into moshing. Yeah. Lord of the Pit. All their songs sound like
Let's get
Exodus.
the circle going.
Yeah, it's like Exodus, Toxic Waltz.
Totally.
Every song sounds like that or something by DRI. So it could be that. In fact, I think I saw, there's always that one guy who's got his own homemade thing on his jacket that he had probably his girlfriend or his mom or somebody paint Lord of the Pit on there just because with quotes around it,
Oh, and he's the guy who starts the pit.
I know they're moshing all the time. I'm calling the Lord of the Pit. And his mom's like, son, I did this for you. He's like, thanks, Mom.
Crocheted you a hat.
Lord of the Pit is happy with you.
He talks about himself in the third person.
Lord of the Pit is pleased. No. Where's my raviolis?
Lord of the Pit.
So that, I have to say that's probably a magic card.
And you are correct.
Yes,
it is a black creature. Demon. Damn, Dave. You do it. From Alpha, rare, flying, trample at the beginning of your upkeep. Sacrifice a creature other than Lord of the Pit. If you can't, Lord of the Pit deals 7 damage to you, which is pretty hardcore.
And then it helps you up.
And
after it stomps your face and elbows you in the nuts, and then it helps you up, Gets you a
because
beer.
that's the rules of the pit.
That's the rules of the pit, unless you're at a Pantera concert.
And that one girl who wasn't paying attention got clocked in that pit at Datura.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, you did. You were looking right at her, and I leaned behind you.
The one who was kind of drunk.
The one who was kind of drunk and not paying attention,
like
and she
really
was
drunk.
skipping around in the pit,
Yeah,
thinking
and
like
she
she was
got
being
her-
cute, and then somebody just
Somebody just ran into her, and they didn't. It wasn't malicious.
No, but they helped her up. I mean, and
They
then
helped
she
her up.
was like, but I was watching it. I watched it happen, and I
Watch
was
the
like,
drama unfold.
right.
We've all been there.
Well, she was drawing a lot of attention to herself, and that was not intentional. Somebody just got pushed into her, and
Yeah.
she wasn't like bracing herself for you and I are like edge pit guys. We stand at the edge and like throw the elbow
Sadly.
to keep people in there. Not me, man. Not with this old back. Fuck that.
I've sadly had to accept that I'm now an edge pit guy. I like getting up close to the bands because I like being up there and seeing how they're doing stuff and just watching them. And I like being close to the action. I don't like standing back with my arms crossed like all these wusses that stand back there now at shows. I like being up there.
Yeah.
But I used to love moshing. I was hugely into moshing. I lived for the pit. When I would not ever call myself Lord of the Pit, and my mother never painted that onto my shirt. However, I did love to mosh. But
I am one of those people who like do not like to be interrupted when I'm watching the band.
Yeah.
So I will stay on the edge because I enjoy the excitement and the electricity that the pit creates.
Right.
I will throw the shoulder to keep you in there. And by the way, I want a Lord of the Pit jacket now. So you think your
I'll
mom
draw
will?
you one.
Yeah, that would be great.
Actually, you know what? I'll go. I think if you go to the fairgrounds, the state fairgrounds, you can go to the flea market, and I think they have those guys who do the
Airbrush,
airbrushing, and I'll do that style. Just give me your cool jacket that you're going to put your paladin patch on.
Okay. And we'll put Lord of the
take
Pit.
that first, and then we'll get Lord of the Pit. And then,
Right.
And then you can place your paladin patch appropriately.
Man,
It's a lot of alliteration there.
there's a lot going on there. All right, here we go. Number 5. You are 4 for 4.
Has anyone ever gone 5 for 5?
One person did, but the show had corrupted files, so we couldn't use it. His name is Brian Ziola. He's a comedian from Florida who plays Magic the Gathering, and we interviewed him and JT Habersat in Winston-Salem with Reed, and the file got corrupt. It was a great show. Brian absolutely destroyed everybody on this. Anyway, you have an opportunity to tie that. Actually, we'll call you the first person to ever do this if you get number 5 correct. Number 5.
Number 5 alive.
Acerbus. And I will spell it for you. Acerbus. Acerbus or acerbus?
Yeah.
Or
Sounds like a term from chemistry class. Right?
A-C-E-R.
Acerbic acid. Or
Acerbic, yeah. A-C-E-R-B-U-S.
Acerbus.
Acerbus.
Let's just say it the worst way we can. Acerbus. Acerbus. Acerbuse.
It like when you glance at it, you
Aceribus.
think it's like abacus. It looks sort of like that, but
Yeah. I think I know this.
Okay.
You want me to just go for it?
knock it out. Let's hear
Let's
it.
just not. I'm going to say this is a metal band.
Dave Price, you have gone 5 for 5.
Yes!
You are correct. Heavy thrash metal with black metal influences from Northern Ireland, formed in 1999, known for their EP, The Shape of Noise to Come.
Yeah.
David Price, you went 5 for 5. We have some lovely parting gifts from our sponsor, Sarcasm. Oh, like you really want me to read sponsorship here? Well, allow me to oblige. Sarcasm. It's not just for assholes anymore. If you have any recommendations for things we should be discussing in the gaming world, send us an email at cpgbpodcast@gmail.com. Holla at us on Instagram at cpgbpodcast. Tweet at us on Twitter or the Facebooks at cpgbpodcast. And let's finish up with books, Dave.
Books.
You happen to have
Read 'em.
an astounding collection of
I do.
tabletop gaming
Sounds me
books.
that my wife doesn't murder me.
Saying you collect tabletop gaming books.
I do.
You collect Dragon magazines, Imagine magazines, and can you just tell us a little bit more about your collection in general and like what it's comprised of and why you collect?
I collect because I'm in my middle age and I'm stupid. That's why I collect things. No, I'm just kidding. for whatever reason, you hit middle age and you decide, I'm going to collect some bullshit. You know, I'm going to collect stamps, or I'm going to connect, old tires from bicycles. I'm going to connect license plates from other countries. I have realized throughout my life, ever since I was originally into Dungeons and Dragons, and I probably played my first game of Dungeons and Dragons in like 1980. I have an older brother who got the basic D&D set, the original basic Dungeons and Dragons set. And yes, for you youngsters, that is the version of D&D where you could be a dwarf as a class.
Yes, not a race. Okay. It was a class.
It was both, You could be an elf or dwarf. But it was called basic D&D. The design was meant to lead you into the game and make it simple. And that's why they did it that way. Anyway, I realized throughout my life, ever since I've been initially played Dungeons and Dragons and probably initially read Lord of the Rings, that original role-playing game world always held a certain magic and appeal to me. That not just the game itself, but the everything about it, the aesthetics of the games, the style of the art, just the production qualities of the things always really captured my imagination.
And we're talking about TSR, which stood for Tactical Strategy Research.
Studies Rules, right?
Tactical,
Studies Rules,
TSR. Is that right? Yep, which was founded by Gary Gygax in Geneva, Wisconsin.
I don't really actually know off the top of my head the year that TSR was founded. I want to say it's like 74 or something like that. But yes, so basically what I have a fairly specific criteria of what I collect. I collect anything for Dungeons and Dragons, the game, that is run from the very beginning all the way until 1989, which is when the second edition of D&D released. I don't collect second edition. So I collect anything that was still coming out for first edition. With second edition, I don't collect
Which includes advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
So this includes so these conventions are ones that people use now. So people refer to OD&D or original or old D&D, depending on who you ask, is the stuff that originally came out and it was in a very small white box. And they were these smaller than a regular sheet of paper sized books that were...
They were booklets,
little booklets. That was the OD&D. That was the
looked
original
like an instruction manual.
Dungeons and Dragons, which grew out of chainmail, which was basically where these guys had all been playing strategy war games. And then they were like, hey, let's put, fantasy creatures into them. Probably mainly because of Lord of the Rings. They put things like, hey, there's these huge fights in Lord of the Rings between orcs and knights and, all these creatures. Why don't we create rules for those creatures? And so they put out this book, Chainmail, that had fantasy rules for wargaming. And then that grew into the idea of...
I think you're talking about Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax.
Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, amongst others. Many people contributed to the ideas as they played through these concepts. And then they grew into the idea of, rather than fighting a huge battle, the focus not being 100% on the fighting, but being on in searching and investigating and exploring dungeons. They were thinking of things like Moria from Lord of the Rings, underground layers, and that corresponding to the difficulty. The deeper you went in, the more difficult the monsters you would fight, and the more fantastic the treasures you would find, and the more powerful your character would become.
And Gary Gygax, the book about Gary Gygax called Empire of Imagination talks about when he was a kid, he would break into an abandoned asylum. Mm-hmm. And he would say the place looked like they just took the patients out and shut the door. Mm-hmm. That there was still like gurneys there and blood on the floor. And conceptually they say that's kind of where a dungeon crawl came from.
Yeah, you can imagine how that would have impacted a kid with a brilliant imagination. There were these steam tunnels that probably still exist. They go all under NC State campus.
I know exactly what you're talking about. No.
So it was a thing that a friend of my brother's was like, hey, there's these steam tunnels under NC State. We should go down there and check it out. And we were like, all right, because that's what you say. So we drove over there at like midnight on some Saturday night. My brother's friend drove us over there. We walked around. I could tell you the location now, but I'm not going to say it on the air. But
right.
We walked around, and this would have been in the mid 80s, right? And we walked around, and we found there's this manhole, and this is late at night. He brought a crowbar with him, and we like pulled up this manhole, and it was behind some bushes. And we just climbed down there with some flashlights. There's like 4 of us. And then we spent the next like 3 hours wandering around, exploring the steam tunnels underneath NC State campus, not finding the CPGB studio broadcasting site because it's in a totally different stretch of the enormous steam tunnels. But it was pretty fascinating and fun, and that was the thing to do.
The dungeon crawl. Tunnels. Oh, you wanted to talk about?
We were doing the dungeon crawl.
Well, you're doing the dungeon crawl before
we were down there. We were not. Let me just clear this up. We were not down there pretending to be druids and rangers or anything like that. We were just walking around.
It's okay if you did, Dave.
It would have been fine, but we weren't.
It's okay if you did.
We might have. I don't even remember.
So at what point did you go, you know what, I'm going to start collecting this stuff? Because did you have the original first?
I had a lot of the stuff from
original stuff when you played, yeah.
When I originally played. And my brother was originally the first person who got the basic set. Then I became one of his players because back then
that's how it happens.
You accumulated the people you could. And I was.
You always didn't get to play with the people you wanted to. You played with the people who had read the books and understood the game.
So John had his friends his age who he played with, but if they needed an extra player, it was me, and I was reasonably clever and I could figure out what was going on and fit in with them. And then later on, I started playing my own games and running my own game, was a dungeon master and getting my friends into it and stuff like that. And
when did you realize I'm actually collecting now? Like when did that coin?
It was since I've been in game theory.
When does that worm turn? Oh, really? So this has been in the most the last 6 years, really.
Yeah, this has all happened since I've been managing game theory. It's not directly related to that. I think it's in some weird way connected, though. I think it's
there's a correlation, not a causation.
I get made fun of a lot by certain of my staff members because they say I don't play any games, which isn't true. I don't play I probably play games the least of anyone on my staff. I'm one of the people who play the games the least of people on my staff. But
you collect
more than they do, and that's just because of my life and my situation. I don't play games as much as I would like to. I would love to be running a D&D campaign, like an Advanced Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
It all comes down to time, right?
I don't have time right now. At some point I'm going to, and damn it, I'll have all the stuff. But at some point I think I just cope with that, and I realized I really I think I found my boxing. We were moving, and I was like, man, I had a lot of stuff. I had quite a lot of D&D stuff. I wonder how much stuff I don't have. I knew some things that I didn't have, and I started looking around for lists of things. There were a few podcasts I listened to that were about old D&D stuff, and I just started looking around for places you could buy it. I found there are a few sites. There's eBay. There's places like that, and I just started slowly seeking out things and buying a few things when the price was right, and that became kind of collecting. I'm not there are levels of collector. There's a group that I belong to on Facebook, a closed group that's for RPG auctions, and people auction things off on there. And I sometimes buy things on there. Many of the people who are on there who are selling stuff are real collectors. And these are people with insane disposable income. And there are certain items out there that I've resigned myself to the fact that I will never own. There are certain things that they cost thousands and thousands.
Is there a holy grail for you? Is there
there's several.
What exactly are those?
I don't know, man.
You do. You don't act like you don't know what the
I had one of my holy grails. I had been looking for a number one issue of number one of Dragon Magazine. I got one.
And now Dragon Magazine, for people who don't know,
Dragon Magazine is the official magazine of Dungeons and Dragons. It was started under TSR and came out as a monthly magazine.
78, is that right? when they first started
it would have
printing?
been before that.
So like 76?
76, I think. I'm doing a bad job of demonstrating my knowledge of this.
It's so much stuff though, right?
I have a lot of stuff.
So that was one grail that you like checked off. And another one recently, we're actually...
I wouldn't know if this is a grail, but I just got an item in the mail
Dave,
that I had ordered.
So Dave walks into my house with this manila envelope, and he's like, "Hey man, I brought this." And I'm like, "Oh," and I'm thinking, "Oh, you shouldn't have. I appreciate it, man. This must be like the thank you for me having him on the podcast." He goes, "Oh no, man. I just got this for me. This is for me."
I just thought I would open it and show you how cool it was
in front of me, and then take it away from
and
me.
then
I'm
say,
like, "Oh, that's
look
cool.
how cool! You should be a loser and collect old D&D stuff like me."
So what we're looking at is a Pegasus magazine,
Number 3,
number 3, with a picture of a Pegasus on the front. How on the nose is that?
1981.
We glanced through this earlier, and essentially this would tell you where all the gaming conventions are going to be, and they had to like very loosely talk about Dungeons and Dragons, but not call it Dungeons and Dragons, so they didn't get, because TSR was always very litigious. Wizards of the Coast still is. They like to sue people for infringement, but this Pegasus magazine is pretty cool. It smells delicious, just perfect pulp. It is so good, man. I love it.
So it's made by Judges Guild, published by Judges Guild. That's the company. Which Judges Guild is a company that dates back to the 70s. And it was originally one of the first companies that had a license agreement with TSR to release material for Dungeons and Dragons. So they released a number of official Dungeons and Dragons or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons adventures and supplements. And they published several different magazines over the course during this time. And they used to be able to refer to Dungeons and Dragons directly until they lost that licensing agreement, and then they started referring to them as a Universal Fantasy Supplement. That's what it would say if it was actually for D&D, but they couldn't say that.
UFS.
They did some little tiny changes to the way stats appear so that they wouldn't get sued.
AC is in there. 8 hit dice, all of the same mechanics. It is for D&D.
And it's cool because it's a snapshot of what the world of role-playing was like in 1981.
And so besides Pegasus and Dragon Magazine and all of the D&D stuff, what else do you collect? There's you have like other like tabletop-oriented stuff that you collect as well.
So I collect everything, like I said, everything related that I can find related to first edition D&D. So that means TSR products, Judges Guild products, various magazines, including Judges Guild's various magazines, Dragon Magazine, the magazine that predates Dragon called the Strategic Review, which was, I think there's about 10 issues. And then
Blackmore.
Imagine Magazine, which is TSR UK, the UK branch of TSR had their own magazine called Imagine, and they were like desperately trying to capture the imagination of the Brits over there who were playing D&D. It's an interesting history of role-playing games in England and in Europe, I'm sure, more broadly. Let's just say that Imagine Magazine was not a huge success, but there are about 30 issues. It's an official D&D product, and they're pretty cool.
I think TSR was ahead of their time when they were trying to expand on that.
I think so. Well, there was also the problem in England was Games Workshop. So
in Games Workshop,
White Dwarf magazine is another thing I collect because White Dwarf was an officially connected to AD&D and D&D in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s. And so I collect, the first 100 issues or so of White Dwarf, which I'll have all those. And White Dwarf was a publication put out by Games Workshop, which is a British company, known mostly now for Warhammer, Warhammer 40,000, these large-scale miniatures games. Back then, they were a small game company, and they were the licensed producer of they manufactured and sold Dungeons and Dragons in England. They were the official D&D place. So like if you wanted to buy a D&D adventure or player's handbook in England, it was being, I think, made in England.
Printed in England.
Printed in England, I believe.
Do you have one? Player's
I
Handbook?
don't have any.
Player's Handbook printed in England?
Well, when it comes to the Games Workshop produced items, as far as I'm aware, there's only a few things where you can actually tell a difference in any significant way, and it's on a couple of the adventure modules. It has a Games Workshop logo on there in addition to the TSR.
And on the interior, it'll say printed in.
I don't own any of those. I would, if I found one and the price was right, I would snap it up in a heartbeat. But I don't. It's not that. That's not really the top of my list. I really just want to have one of everything.
Yep.
I don't really care that much about getting that into it. But if the price is right, yeah, I would snap that shit up in a heartbeat.
Totally.
So Games Workshop, they had that license, and then when they lost the license to D&D, by then there were other role-playing games around there.
Yeah.
And they started going into that. They designed their own role-playing game called Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing. There was also Tunnels and Trolls. There was also RuneQuest. Yeah. All these games RuneQuest in particular had a big footprint in England already. And was super popular. They started putting RuneQuest adventures in White Dwarf magazine. And so I think when Imagine magazine came along, people were like, "Why would I buy this? I have White Dwarf." You know, and we'll just stick to being British. I think Imagine always felt a little too American to them.
Oh, okay,
Even though
so
the
it becomes
people who
about
produced it were Brits.
It becomes about pride.
Most of the editorial staff were British, but yeah, there was a pride, and this is our White Dwarf is our own magazine.
And I would imagine the writing style is a bit different as well.
Maybe.
So
yeah.
I mean, but besides this collection,
what else?
You are also like a big H.P. Lovecraft fan. That is like, as far as books go, you have read all of the H.P. Lovecraft stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
So my other thing that I kind of collect, and this is a real half-ass collecting. I don't. There's nothing real methodical about it, where as there is with my role-playing game collection. But yeah, I collect pulp fiction, specifically fantasy and science fiction. So. There's a thing called the Appendix N, which is Gary Gygax in some of the early publications of Dungeons and Dragons. They include this thing called the Appendix N, which was at the end of the book. They said, "Here, if you're interested in why we made D&D and what inspired us, here's a list of authors that inspired us," and that was what they refer to now as Appendix N. And those authors included Tolkien, and they included H.P. Lovecraft, amongst others.
Robert E. Howard
of Conan fame, and Kull the Conqueror, and Solomon Kane fame. So I began kind of at the same. I always read fantasy fiction in addition to just regular fiction and regular nonfiction. I read a fair amount of fantasy fiction and science fiction. And I decided to kind of delve into this Appendix N quite deeply. I was curious. I'm like Gollum. I was interested in the beginnings of things, so I'd climb down into the bottom of the mountain. And so I have hundreds of these like small paperback books dating back to the advent of paperback books that are quite old, that are sitting around my house, driving my lovely wife crazy.
And one thing I think we failed to mention is that you are, by college learning, right? Archaeologist. Sorry.
Yeah.
So doesn't that really sort of play into like history and unearthing all of this interesting, deep history of stuff? And that's sort of leads into that, doesn't it?
It's connected. Yeah. There's a definite connection. That's what I have a degree in. I've always been interested in the beginnings of things and where things come from. It's the same in music. I've spent enormous amount of time like tracing the roots of metal, the roots of punk, the roots of rock and roll. And I own quite a big record collection of stuff because I just am curious where the ideas come from. Where is it that someone said, where did Black Sabbath come from? Where did they say, this is what we want to do?
And you even like go to H.P. Lovecraft's hometown as like part of...
I did go to Providence, Rhode Island. Yeah, not for the H.P. Lovecraft reason. That was actually a happy accident. One of my dearest friends of my life, Jennifer Zartarian, a long friend of mine, her and her husband, Owen, live in Providence.
And you're like, while I'm here, I might as well...
Might as well walk around and look at all the sites that are Lovecraft related, of which there are many.
So I have a question about H.P. Lovecraft. And this is something that with Robert E. Howard as well, that I've struggled with is that they have both been outed as like horrible racists. And, you know, we talk about on this podcast about separating the art from the artist. And like in comedy, stand-up comedians, it's like, well, you are your art. It's like, you know, Louis C.K., it's like, you can't separate that. That's a person saying the thing.
Yeah.
And then like if somebody makes a movie, it's like, oh, well, you know, he was a shit person who was a pedophile, but oh my God, he made amazing films. You know, it's like, and so people like,
how do I sit and still laugh at Annie Hall knowing that Woody Allen has done some of the things he's done?
Yeah. Right.
You know?
So how do you like come to terms with that?
Yeah, I do. I tell you, I would just be honest about it, honest and open about it. I am vehemently anti-racist and despise racism and think that people who are racist and who are actively, you know, hateful in their lives should be driven out of their holes wherever we can find them. Personally, that's how I feel. When it comes to like, how do I separate that from art? I don't think anyone has a great answer. I would say this. When I discovered Lovecraft, I was a teenager. I didn't know anything of, I wasn't yet reading literature at a level that I would later kind of learn a little more about how you read.
The craft.
When I was like, say, in college.
The craft of reading.
Yeah, and really picking out things and looking for themes and stuff like that. So when I was first reading them, I wouldn't say it was I was a pretty advanced reader, so I wouldn't say it was like a superficial reading. But I wasn't thinking about stuff like that. I was a stupid teenager. I wasn't looking for those things. I was looking for the wonderful things about Lovecraft, the science fiction, the weirdness, the horror, just like the cosmic terror, all these themes which I still love about his writing, and his incredible imagination. And these are the kind of things that inform my lyric writing. I try to do my own, probably an impersonation of him in a sense. And so later on in life, I realized, wow, I can't believe he's doing that. And the more I looked into certain of his stories, it's not in every story, but there's definitely some racism in there.
Correct.
There's a few stories in particular that are make it pretty obvious. There was a lot of racism going on around in the U.S. at that time, and we're talking about the turn into the 20th century, so the early 1900s. Many people were probably casually racist in a way that they didn't even know they were being it.
And however,
this was more than that.
And the thing is, if you were to probably stop the man on the street and ask them how they felt about race relations, we're not saying that it's right or correct, that they probably had the same thoughts that H.P. Lovecraft did. It's that we have all of his journal writings. We have all of his letters. We have everything to examine from him at the time. He was as racist and probably more racist than a lot of people were at that time in history. And I think I don't know if you know, recently we were talking about the guys at Evil Hat that make Fate.
Yeah.
Just really recently released an H.P. Lovecraft themed.
And they had a wonderful statement about it.
They put out a statement saying, you know, this is something that we acknowledge, we understand. However, these are good themes, and regardless of the person that created them, we want to disavow it. And I thought, you know, that is a very responsible, very woke thing to do, to say, look, we understand where this guy was, and it takes responsibility for it, and it says, let's move on.
And I think that was the way to handle it. I don't know. I'm not, there can be other people out there who can come up with the perfect way to handle this. I just know that if you look at H.P. Lovecraft's life, if you just look at his racism as revealed by his stories, it's more of the era.
Yeah.
If you read his letters, which he never, I'm sure, this doesn't excuse it in any way, but they were written to friends and they were not intentioned. Clearly, he never expected them to be published. They reveal much the more deeper and darker side of his views on things.
Right.
The sadly, if anyone tried to admire and hold up him as a man, then you're just a fucking loser.
Right? Yeah, you are.
Because he clearly was a talented writer and had incredible imagination and was able to put these things together and create something really amazing and interesting and just thought-provoking that has lasted for a long time, and people are still interested in his stuff. But he was also afraid of women, intimidated by women, intimidated by anybody who was more masculine than him, who was from a different country than him, who was of a different race than him, and hid behind the skirts of his mother and aunts and things like that in his life. He had kind of a sad life in a lot of ways, and it puts me in mind of, not to get too political, but some of the sad cases we've seen in our country of the types of people who end up going crazy and shooting a bunch of people.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
They're hiding out with all these twisted thoughts, and they're just feeding their own little mentality because they're some sort of frustrated
and they
self-radicalize. And they just decide that they're somehow going to make everything better by killing a bunch of people. Now, obviously, he never did that. Thank goodness. And that wasn't the route he went, but he did go down the route of being an incredible racist.
We are deathly over time, David Price.
Okay.
We have talked an immense amount. We could probably go on for another hour.
So wrap it up. That's what I got. That's all I got, man.
Yeah. By the way, if you have any recommendations for things we should be reading, send us an email at cpgbpodcast@gmail.com. And you can holler at us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at CPGB Podcast. Dave, you got a show coming up at Raleigh Death Fest on June 13th with Eldritch Horror. That's at Maywood in Raleigh. And the doors are like 3:30, like in the afternoon.
It's a fest, man. This is Death Fest.
Right.
I'm not sure how many bands there are.
Actually, I got the list. I just found the list. You got
12?
Sardonic Smile at 4. Morose Fatality is following.
Friend of ours.
Hubris, Crystal Spiders, Hylic.
Friends of ours.
Hembry and the Satan Sisters, Malediction. I like them a lot.
Yeah,
the
good.
Day of the Beast, which would make a great Magic the Gathering card or metal band. Widow, who we just talked about as well.
Good friends of ours.
And then, of course, they're your feature right before you guys headline at 10:45. I'm going to see how well you guys stay on time. That's one of my big things about a metal show is or a big fest show is how much people stay on time.
It's hard to play a big fest like that because you got to stay off the sauce all night, man.
Right.
It is hard, man.
Especially if you start at 3:30. Yeah.
It'd be easy. I'd rather, in some respects, you'd rather play first because you can just be like, go up there and you play.
Knock it out.
Then you just grab a big barbecue sandwich or something and a couple of beers and just suck it down and then you just get up there in the fringe of the pit the rest of the night.
That's right. Elbow people in the side as they come near you.
We'll be trying desperately to stay sober all night until we go on the stage and play some of our new material. We're very excited about that show. Should be the debut show of not only a bunch of our new songs, but of Adam and Tyler playing with us live. Assuming we don't try to do some little side show beforehand, which I don't think we will. But
cool.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. Dave Price, thank you so much for coming in, man. We really
Handshake
appreciate it. We're doing a handshake right across the table. I don't know why, because it's not on camera.
This is actually happening.
It is.
Contact.
Our show is produced and edited by me, Ryan Parker. Our opening theme is by Mega Colossus. CPGBpodcast@gmail.com is the email, and at CPGB Podcast is our handle on social media. Anything else, Dave?
I think we've said plenty.
I think you're right. We will see you guys at the shows.